do this live. Oh wait, we gotta. Oop. Woo! Welcome back. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for Panels and Frames, but we are back. Better than ever.
Hiatus is the word of the day. Everyone's
Right.
going on the hiatus. Yes,
I mean,
this is great.
If you follow us in the music world on Wook Plus, we can just claim that we had drummer issues.
All right, we had drummer issues, and today's Sponge went on hiatus. Poor Sponge. So, we got a cool poster, and that's why I was like, we should get the band back together. And we got lots of other stuff to talk about.
So. We got lots to talk about, and hey, for those that celebrate, happy return to Verdansk Day for all the Modern Warfare fans out there, like myself. I just downloaded the update. I'm dying to go jump back in and play some Verdansk. That was always my favorite map. So it's an exciting day for everyone, and we got lots of news to coverage. We'll talk a little Daredevil, Born Again on Disney Plus, and we'll talk a little Spider-Man news, brand new day announcement. We'll talk a little Thunderbolts. So let's jump into it. What do you got, Kev?
Well, two things that I found interesting just off the bat, and then we'll get into this Thunderbolts poster. But Halle Berry was asked about being Storm, and she said, well, keep waiting because I'm not going to be there. So apparently there will be no Storm, or if there is a Storm, it will be a variant from another. We aren't sure where the X-Men are coming from. I mean, I think we kind of know. And then Hugh Jackman is apparently going to be in Doomsday as Wolverine, which we assumed.
Right. Well, you would think him and Deadpool. I would think you can't just have that great movie and what it did and then not bring them in either. I think we'll get a lot more announcement. I think this was just the first batch, and I have heard that with some talent like Tom Holland right now, who's shooting the Christopher Nolan film, they didn't put him in it. It sounds like there might be like two phases to not just the cast announcement, but the way they're going to shoot and stuff. So they announced, I think, the first group of people who will be shooting the first stuff, and then
I hear there's another 60 on his other side, another 59 characters on the other side, and maybe it's we're introduced to one side.
Right,
like
that's
one side that's fighting the other. Yeah,
right. It could be that too. But I definitely think, because there was a lot of names missing and a lot of random things, the way part of the X-Men and certain, the old X-Men and not even Days of Future Past X-Men, but then you still have like the Kelsey Grammer character in the Beast mode, and like it's very interesting who was left out and who was announced. So,
Patrick Stewart was announced.
Yes, yeah.
And it seems like there were kind of teams that were announced. Like you could lump these groups of people together as being connected in the comic books,
Right. And Ant-Man was announced, but not Wasp. And so it's kind of interesting.
Was his kid announced?
What?
Was his kid announced? Because I think she's going to be like the young Avenger. She's going to be with all of those, Kamala and
we'll get into it a little bit more when we start talking Spidey, but it's also very interesting that no Tom Holland announced in it, but yet Spider-Man Brand New Day releases July 31st and Doomsday's May 1st. So it's a couple months away from it, 2026, obviously next year, but it's interesting. May 1st, 2026, you get Doomsday, and then July 31st you get the Spider-Man movie, which is so exciting because I love it when we get like two Marvel movies months apart from each other. It makes me so happy.
How often do they actually stick to the dates?
Right. Well, you would think these would happen because I'm assuming what happens in one is going to carry over, but it's also interesting because if Doomsday is taking place on Earth 616 and Earth 6, or destroying Earth 616, and that's where Spider-Man lives, where's Brand New Day going to take place? Or is that why Brand New Day is named Brand New Day, because it's a brand, like he's somewhere else now or something? So interesting, but we can
let's look at this Thunderbolt poster.
Let's talk
that they
Thunderbolts to
released,
start.
because that is happening now. That is soon. We got what,
A
about a
month.
month?
A month. Less than a month to go.
So,
Yes. I'm
and they
excited.
also released a series of each of them,
Mhm.
like pulled out of this, I guess, basically what it is. So there's lots of great thumbnail material there
And I
for
think
us.
it's great too, like the way each one, the half of them are looking one way, the other half is looking the other way. I want to know what everyone's looking at in this poster, like what is going on here. I know it's just like the key art and whatever, but I always like to kind of look for clues or whatever in it. It's just very funny the way everyone's looking off, and you have the two sort of masked guys on one side of her, and then the two unmasked people within,
Right.
one in the back with a full mask. But it's just an interesting little setup and the way it all looks like lined up there. I'm really excited for this movie. I think it's going to be fun. I'm hoping it's a different style of Marvel movie, sort of more of
Dirty
that.
Dozen kind of Mag 7
Yes,
thing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And even Florence has had some quotes about that. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more action and a little bit of like, comedy in there with like the back and forth, and a little bit more of like, we can call um Endgame and those like time heist movies, they were kind of like in that zone of like caperish, because they had to go back in time and steal all this stuff. They've said that this is kind of in that zone too, like sort of that fun-ish sort of different type of film. So I'm excited, very excited to see this, and I can't wait for it.
Yep. It's going to be a good one. All right, let's talk a little bit about Daredevil and Muse. Let me start off by asking you. We know that they did a bunch of reshoots and they did rewrites, and that's how we ended up with, the opening episode, and finally saying yes, we're bringing in the Netflix universe. It's
Mm-hmm.
connected now.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Cage lives in the same universe as Spider-Man, as far as I'm concerned. But do you feel like you can tell where the recuts were as the story's gone?
Uh, Here and there, I can't. I think they did a pretty good job with that, as far as what they tweaked
Hmm.
and the story that they wanted to tell with it, and how they kept it in line. I think there was a few things that you kind of stood out and that you could notice, but overall, I mean, the show in itself is so well done and such a refreshing Marvel show. Like I feel like compared to some of the things we've watched, it kind of got us back to being excited. It kind of got you back to when they first started coming out with the shows, and you're like, oh, like WandaVision and
Right.
things like
They're
that. That were
leaning into the street level. The violence is gritty, and
the,
it hasn't missed a beat from the first one with the quality of
no,
the
and
fight sequences and
that first episode and even the second episode were so good and so drew you in right away. And I mean, I mentioned it, before with just to you about how this is the difference between the Star Wars shows and the Marvel shows. Like
Mhm.
the care put into it and the way it was directed and done, and that one shot that they tried to pull off in it at the beginning, and just sucked you right in, and you had the death at the beginning, and you were just like, oh my god, I'm hooked. Like, what is happening in this show? You were in it. And I'm hopeful that with Andor coming out, we'll discuss Andor in future episodes, because I'm very excited for that. That was one of the best ones, and I've heard the second season is just as good. But this to me is what sets Marvel so apart. Is this show is it's just so well done, and the characters are so good, and it just brings you into that world and feels like many movies, right? Like it feels like a mini movie every episode, and you're like, this is fantastic. And it just I wonder where it's leading. And we talked about this real quick before. There's going to be a season 2, so that excites me as well, knowing that whatever's happening it isn't just them going to be like, okay, well, we just did that one and that's it. Sorry. You're like, okay, we're all going to get conclusions. We're going to get more story. We're going to get more out of this, plus wherever
Mhm.
these end up in the movies going forward. So
Right.
fantastic.
I felt like through the first bunch of episodes, it was very centered on just it was either Matt or Kingpin
Right.
in every scene. I feel like with this seventh episode, Heather Glenn became a character on her own because they went through. She had a confrontation with Daredevil. I mean, with Matt, Matt said the relationship is fake. to her, you know, this whole thing, and she had the thing, and then she has the confrontation with Muse, and she kills him. I mean, it's you know, the ramifications of that. I'm just fascinated with going forward. And beyond that, how did they kill Muse off? I mean, we've been waiting for this. There's been the build up. He's been in the background the whole time, and then when his big scene comes, so I think that the payoff of this is going to be is when he comes back as an Inhuman, because this Muse that we've had in this show is not the comic book Muse.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do the sensory deprivation thing to Matt. He was a Taekwondo guy, you know.
And I think that's a really interesting thing that again, what a move by them. Like they set it up, you know, as kind of that in the first couple with him sort of teasing it, you know, and you're like, and everyone jumped on that as like, oh my God, Muse, like they're bringing Muse in, and everyone did, you know, who is he? What is he? All these things about him. And then to kind of like not ever really acknowledge it, it kind of reminded me of like, you know, in Raiders of the Lost Ark when the guy does all the swordplay and then Indy just shoots him. Like it kind of felt like that. They're like, oh look, and then bang, he's dead. So yes, I think
I wonder if this brings the Punisher back in, because remember I was telling you that I didn't think we'd see Frank again until the standalone thing they were doing with him and the second season. Now maybe he shows up again, and maybe we deal with the cops with the Punisher tattoos to close this season out. The vigilante task force that Kingpin
and maybe they were more of like the big bads of this season than even Kingpin and Muse were going to be. That was just sort of like set up and like peripheral. But I think to your point, it may not be the end of Muse, right? Like there may be more to this coming, but because it's kind of a shocking thing to just have the rug pulled out of you like that all of a sudden with like such a character that has
gripping TV, makes for gripping
TV and shocking TV, which you like, right? Like you don't want you like to be surprised. You like to be like those holy shit moments and like what they just did what? So it works on that level, and I'm intrigued to see if that really is the end of him or if it's the beginning of something else with that character.
Yeah. So something happens to him, you know, and he becomes Inhuman, because we're definitely going to get White Tiger again with this girl, Angela. Is that her name? I think Angela is what her name is. The niece of the original. So that I think that's coming. You can see the anger in her eyes.
Yes,
interesting,
very.
So, are you a Spider-Man guy? Are you like as big as Spider-Man? I have him on my phone as my screensaver.
Yeah, I am. I've liked all the Spider-Man movies going all the way back to the Tobey Maguire days. Like I thought, you know, when that was the highest grossing film of all time, I thought that was amazing. Amazing Spider-Man. I thought it was amazing that this comic book movie could reign that kind of power, especially back then before we even had the MCU. It was sort of like you're still dealing with sort of the X-Men movies, and then this came out and you're like, oh my gosh, this was a great Spider-Man movie. So going all the way back to those, I love the films. I was always a fan of the comics too, because he was a kid, and I always like as a kid growing up and reading comics, you kind of relate to that more than the adults running around and being superheroes. You were kind of like,
I love the street level heroes, you know, Daredevil, Spider-Man, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones. I love that, you know.
Well, especially with Spider-Man. Especially with Spider-Man, though, because he was dealing with those things that you deal with as teenagers: girls, girlfriends, school, your family, you know, like all these things that are heavy enough as a teenager. And then on top of that, being a hero.
See, and I feel like I don't know if I'm going to be let down, but I feel like looking at what's going to happen with the Brand New Day is that it's not going to be street level at all. You know, it's going to be dealing with him erasing. I mean, the Brand New Day through line in the comics was about him making a deal with the devil, literally, in order, and then no longer be married to marry, you know.
Well, and the crazy thing in that was like the little girl that came to him to, spoiler alert if everyone hasn't read the comics yet, but the little girl that came to him ended up being their kid. And so like that whole thing, another one that kind of tricked him into it or had him do the thing, like change the time thing. It was their kid, and then Mary Jane and him, obviously. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how much of, the name will connect with the comic storyline from it. Like a lot of times they'll use the names, but not really full. They'll use pieces of things from the comics or whatever. I'm more intrigued, like we just talked about, is where he's going to be. Is it Earth 616? Is it destroyed? Because it's setting up like where's it going to be in Brand New Day? Are the next 3 movies for Spider-Man going to be like Homecoming was, always having home in the title? Well, day, because it also kind of goes along with Doomsday, which comes out, as we mentioned before it. So you have Doomsday and then you have Brand New Day. And is that kind of connecting to, after the doom and gloom, now it's a new day starting over, or like rising, and like not just with Spider-Man Brand New Day, because nobody knows who he is anymore, and that on it. So there's a lot of depth to this title, and a lot there, just not on the surface. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And to your point, yes, this may be where it changes from him being street level hero into more of,
Well, I'd say the last movie he did, and the
right.
one
That's what, yeah,
set in
because
Europe. Yeah, I mean, he was.
but he even says, he always wants to be that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So like,
Right.
I'm hoping you'll still have that wherever New York
But
is
I
now,
bet
or whatever he's in.
he won't have any of the cool gear from Tony. So he
No.
will be back to street level in as much as it's something that he's going to have to create himself for the costume.
Well, I was going to
Can-
say, yeah, down to the costume, he's going to need somebody
Yeah.
like something somehow to create the new costume and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's going to
Up
be,
Daredevil's guy. Oh wait, he got killed. Um, Oh, let's talk a little bit about Mephisto. If you remember back when WandaVision came out, I was all on the Mephisto is going to be the big reveal at the end of the series.
you
Never
weren't,
happened.
you were not alone. You were not, that was a lot of like tease talk. Again, people were like, it's gotta be, but and they've done a good job of like hiding, like keeping that away for so long. And so
Right.
it'll be interesting if this is where we finally get it.
Now, have you heard that Sasha Baron Cohen is reportedly being cast as
I have
Mephisto?
I have not. Is that the rumor? I have not heard that. I need to check that out. That is really interesting.
I
I'll
love it.
find out more
Such a
about that.
call. That's such a call. I
Such a
love it.
call. It would fit. It would fit. It would be great. Totally.
Really? Oh, all right. So some other questions. Black suit. Are we eventually going to get the black suit coming back?
I hope so. Yes. I hope so. I think yes. I think that would be pretty spectacular in itself. And I did see too that, it's funny. It's funny because Spider-Man is still Sony, right? And Sony wants to have its own cinematic universe, so to speak, like they did with the Venom movies, which I just watched the final Venom movie.
They tried to do the crossover. There were the
Yeah.
little hints, but it
just never quite. And there's a little thing, there's like little droplets in even the Venom movie, like, that shot of Mexico City from where he is in Mexico and then where he is in the other Earth in Mexico. And one has the sky rises and the city built up, and then the other one is still like flat. So you're kind of like, what does this mean? Where's this at? And Tom Holland spoke about they were as close as you could possibly be to having Tom Holland and him in a film together, or having Spider-Man in that movie. As close as you could be without filming it is where they got to before it fell apart, which I hate when that shit happens. But it would have been nice to see that crossover, because then it would have like at least lent it a little bit. Yeah, of course, money and rights and all of that, I'm sure, always. But
you're making nothing if you ain't doing it.
Right. And that movie was lacking in so many ways to finish up that storyline. It was kind of a disappointment in the way that they just sort of like it. It just shows you the care that go into the MCU movies compared to other studios that try to get into the comic book.
They don't have the bench. Marvel has the bench. Let me ask you about Ned. Ned Leeds. In the comic books, he becomes Hobgoblin.
Yep.
Do we get Hobgoblin? Does he become a villain during this movie? And at the end, we get Hobgoblin?
I mean, they've dropped those hints so many times. And even his line was like, I promise to never become your villain, or whatever it was, like whatever. So I think that set it up that he's going to become that guy. But, that would be such a, I don't know. It would be such a turn.
He's going to be in it.
Of course.
And so is Zendaya.
Yep.
But if he loses all memory and she doesn't know who he is, do we get Gwen Stacy appearing?
Possibly, because they did cast another female in that, and nobody knows what that role is, who she's going to be, if she's going to be, I mean, there's a million characters she could be, so we're not quite sure where that's going to fall. And yeah, how it's all going to shake down. Because yeah, now that nobody knows him, including at the end when he does confront them or her in the coffee shop, and she has no idea who he is. So that kind of set the tone for going forward. Where does this live? Like, where are we going to be?
Right, you had mentioned Venom and all that. What do we do with the fact that Venom is in the MCU from the post-credit scene of No Way Home? He's already there, where we already have Venom in the MCU. So, I mean, come on, guys. Just so somebody gets $1 million less.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it has to work out because look at the Doomsday cast, for crying out loud. I don't think everyone's taking their normal pay for that thing. Like, so yeah, why can't you do it on the smaller version, like bringing Venom in there? It's just such a disappointment that like they couldn't ever like work that out. But
Right.
I'm intrigued. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with it all.
Last thoughts?
It's exciting. There's so much to talk about. I love when it's like the off season, so to speak, in sports, when you still have things to talk about because you're like feeding these rumors and trying to figure things out and trying to put the puzzle together beforehand and seeing what we can do. But living in the now, let's just be thankful that Daredevil is so damn good, and we have a couple more episodes of that, and Thunderbolts is on the horizon, which I love when we're inside of a month of a Marvel movie coming out. It gets me so excited. Like, I can't wait. And yeah,
we don't have an outro video, but
we don't. But
if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. And don't forget to leave comments because we want to hear what your wild theories are. And until next time, stay amazing.
Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching.